The United States became involved in World War II after the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941.
Well, I was only 3 years old, and but I remember in '41, the Pearl Harbor was bombed, and I had a brother that had joined the army in 1941, and he got killed in 1944. Everett Shelton. I had another brother in service at the same time. His name was Wilkie, and he got back okay. He was overseas, but he had gotten drafted. He did not join.
In the earliest days of America's participation in the war, panic gripped the country. If the Japanese military could successfully attack Hawaii, many people wondered what was to prevent a similar assault on the U.S. mainland. This fear of attack translated into a ready acceptance by a majority of Americans of the need to sacrifice in order to achieve victory. During the spring of 1942, a rationing program was established that set limits on the amount of gas, food, and clothing consumers could purchase.
During that time, there was a lot of things rationed during the war, even our food. It was like flour that we could bake with, sugar that we used in cooking.
The United States Office of War Information released posters in which Americans were urged to do less so they'll have enough. They referred to the U.S. troops.
Just several things that was rationed. You had to have stamps to get, and then it went by how many was in your family. Oh my gosh, it was just several things. And one thing, they wanted us to save the tin cans. The food came back then in tin cans, and any kind of scrap metal, they wanted it saved.
Communities conducted scrap metal drives to help build the armaments necessary to win the war.
People told they was going to make bombs out of it, going to use it in a bomb factory. My mother said no, that we just wasn't going to collect any and save it because she really wasn't sure what they's going to do with it. But times were so hard. Nobody was having a happy time.
The actual evacuation for the Japanese into internment camps began on March 22, 1942. Any and all Japanese in America, even American citizens, were forced into isolation into internment camps to ensure that they would not be a threat to other Americans. They were only allowed to take with them what they could carry on their backs. Because of this, they had to make arrangements to store or get rid of everything they owned on short notice. Some of them had as little as only a few days for this, otherwise they had no control of how they would lose their property. Because of their little time, the Japanese would often sell what they owned for a very little fraction of the price it was worth. One woman was reported selling her 26-room hotel for as little as $500. Refrigerators were sold for as little as $5. The conditions in their internment camps were rough. The camps were quickly set up at places such as fairgrounds or horse race tracks. The Japanese even had to build everything for themselves, such as their own mattresses and their own schools. The very people who were being kept prisoner at those camps had to create everything for themselves. Despite the harsh treatment of the Japanese, surprisingly, few Americans who were unaffected by it knew much about it at the time. Do you remember anything about the camps the Japanese were put in?
No.
Many Americans who were alive during the time still know little about it to this day. People in the U.S. grew increasingly dependent on radio reports for news of the fighting overseas.
I remember one of the letters that my brother had wrote. He was telling our parents where all they had been in service, and they had cut little holes in the letter. They cut out the name of those places. They would censor the mail then. And I know there's lots of things on TV about the wars that I could watch, but that would just upset me about it.